War. War is an appalling affair caused by malicious people with corrupt intentions. The effects spread throughout the participants and even those not involved. Both Billy Pilgrim, from the book Slaughterhouse 5, and Elie Wiesel, from Night, heavily experienced war. In Night, Elie Wiesel is a Jewish prisoner of the Holocaust. Throughout the book, the author demonstrates what it is like to live as a Jewish prisoner of war in Auschwitz. Elie is treated poorly, became extremely malnourished, and is perceived as less than human. Even after the war, the self-conflict with Elie and his demons continue. Due to the frequent deaths and hardships that continue to face Elie, he grows numb to the pain as it becomes a normal way of life. The same thing transpires throughout Billy's life as he relives the most devastating parts of his life multiple times. Billy also has a new outlook on life due to his interaction with the Tralfamadorians that tell him how everything he experiences is not a matter to stress over, as people who may seem dead in one moment will not be in the next. In addition, the aliens in of itself can symbolize a new aspect of the way war affects people. Billy is an American prisoner of war who has been drafted into World War II. Billy has his own unique experiences and responses to the war. He was constantly treated as less than the others and continuously deals with lesser idea of himself. Elie and Billy have a similar experience when it comes to dealing with death. However, their social interactions differ from each other. Rather than their physical and emotional similarities in these World War II testimonies, Elie Wiesel and Billy Pilgrim are similar in terms of physical and emotional reactions, yet different in their social reactions, symbolizing how war always affects people but in different ways.
Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel both become emotionally desensitized to death due to the severe experiences during the war. Billy, a veteran of World War II, was taken prisoner of war during the expanse of his time serving. Towards the end of his captivity, Billy was transported to Dresden, the future site of a massive bombing that killed thousands. After this tragic event occurs, he returns to the city from his bunker via horses to loot remaining goods. When bystanders display the grave conditions of the horses to Billy, he does something he had not done during the entirety of the war. When Billy saw the conditions of his means of transportation, he burst into tears. He hadn't cried about anything else in the war. Vonnegut 197. In the midst of being in the epicenter of mass destruction, Billy found himself dry-eyed. Once he was given the perspective of seeing the horse's condition, he cried for the first time during the war. The immense amount of death that Billy experienced desensitized him to any emotions. He found himself unable to cry about all the innocent lives lost due to the war altering his emotional connectivity. Billy, a time traveler, also relied on his space transportation to escape from the possessive grips of grief during the war. As Billy Pilgrim was surrounded by casualties constantly, he needed to find a way to adapt to survive. Similarly, Elie Wiesel became numb to death in a tactic to survive. Elie was a victim and survivor of the Holocaust. He and his father were sent to the labor camp of Auschwitz after Elie's sister and mother were sent to the crematorium. They experienced grave dehumanization that threatened their life every single day. After the surviving prisoners had to endure a long and treacherous journey to a new camp, they were broken down as people. Ellie's father was getting sicker by the minute and died days following the completion of their journey. Elie expresses his emotion. I did not weep, and it pained me that I could not weep. But I was out of tears, and deep inside me, if I could have searched the recesses of my feeble conscience, I might have found something like free at last. Wiesel 112. Elie Wiesel could not find himself to cry following his father's death because of the war and the Holocaust conditioned him to be desensitized to loss. Elie could not afford to grieve his fellow family and friends. He was stripped of emotions due to the dehumanizing conditions of being a prisoner of war. Due to Elie and the fellow Jews being so deprived of basic human necessities, he could not spend his energy on weeping for his father. He had to continue for himself in his survival. Both Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel were desensitized to death because of their war experiences. They found themselves isolated from their emotions and unable to express their feelings in spite of everything falling apart around them. In connection, the two also share similar physical effects from the war.
Both Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel become malnourished throughout the course of the war, making their experiences very similar. In Slaughterhouse 5, on Billy's boxcar ride to the camp, the prisoners of war are greatly underfed, leading to a decline in their health. In the book, Vonnegut describes how the soldiers would secretly eat syrup made for pregnant women that contained some important vitamins and minerals. By this point, they were very sick and tired, so they would eat the syrup whenever they could. When talking about prisoners of war, Vonnegut writes, "It was skinny and hollow-eyed. Its skins were beginning to blossom with small pores. So were its mouths and throats, and intestines. The malt syrup it spooned at the factory contained only a few of the vitamins and minerals every earthling needs." Vonnegut 163. In night, Ellie and the other prisoners are fed very little from the start, concluding in a quick decline for their physical health. Their dinner rations are small, and they do not get fed often. At first, Ellie was reluctant to eat what they were serving, but he soon became too hungry to be selective. Wiesel writes, "When we went to fetch the evening meal, bread and margarine, I was terribly hungry and swallowed my ration on the spot. My father told me, 'You mustn't eat all at once. Tomorrow is another day.'" Wiesel 44. Although Billy and Ellie's war experiences different ways, they were alike in how they were affected physically. Both protagonists were underfed for much of the time, and they became weak because of this. They were hungry and tired, but whenever they had a meal, it would never fulfill them. Billy had to resort to the secret eating of syrup for pregnant women, and Ellie would eat snow in desperate attempts to feel full. Because of the war, they had to submit themselves to personal embarrassment. They were willing to eat anything because of their hunger. Overall, Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel are very alike in how they were affected by the war physically.
Although Ellie and Billy mostly react in similar ways to war, there are moments where their responses differ greatly. Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel are both affected differently when it comes to social aspects. To start, in Slaughterhouse 5, Billy checks himself into a mental hospital after the war. He believes that he is going crazy and needs help. While in the mental hospital, he makes friends and often chats with his roommate, Elliot Rosewater. However, when Billy is visited by his relatives, his mood automatically changes. The author narrates, "Billy covered his head with his blanket again. He always covered his head when his mother came to see him in the mental ward." Vonnegut 102. In contrast, in night, Ellie's experience differed from Billy's. Far into their stay at the concentration camp, Ellie and the other prisoners continue to persevere through the great challenges that are constantly thrown at them. Unfortunately, Ellie's father faces many struggles that weakens his ability to persevere. One of his greatest struggles was his inability to march in step. The fellow prisoners constantly make fun of this inability. In result, Ellie narrates, "I decided to give my father lessons in marching in step, in keeping time. We began practicing in front of our block." Wiesel 55. Due to the war's impacts, Billy and Ellie faced drastic social changes. Billy's relationship began to fade, specifically Billy and his mother. He becomes embarrassed and ashamed of himself. Thus, he creates new conflicts by isolating himself from the people who are most important to him. The war caused him to think of himself in ways that he believes others would not want to associate with. In contrast, the war does not affect Ellie's relationship in the same way. Ellie wanted to stay close with his father and often helped him through his hardships. The relationship they had was the reason each of them strove to survive. After a long time of facing such harsh treatment, Ellie and his father's relationship began to fade. Soon, Ellie had to focus on his own survival need and began to believe it would be easier to keep going if his father passed, but immediately regrets his thoughts, which is similar to Billy, where he does not want to face her, yet feels bad for making her go through such pain. Billy, throughout the book, tries to distance himself from everyone, wanting to be left behind. Ellie needed a relationship to be his anchor to continue throughout the war. So whereas Billy shut others out, Ellie still attempted to help and work with his fellow prisoners. The way they act differently in these situations show how war always leaves lasting effects on people, but can do so in various ways.
Billy Pilgrim and Elie Wiesel have much in common due to their similar circumstances. Both being prisoners of war, they have experienced extreme dehumanization that changed their emotional well-being and physical health. However, while having similar emotional and physical reactions, socially they react differently. Due to the number of traumatic events occurring to them, they both have lost the ability to feel the weight of those events. On top of that, both World War II survivors lack the nutrients needed and are malnourished. Despite these similarities, the two protagonists differ in how they handle social interactions with the world. Billy kept his distance from others, preferring a closed-off living style. Ellie, on the other hand, desired to build connections with others in order to successfully help him persevere through the Holocaust. As history shows, the unpredictability and ongoing act of war most certainly provide immense consequences for the innocent to endure. Even though a war may be over and every peace treaty possible is signed, it is never truly gone. People will continue to be impacted by conflicts that occurred many years ago, and there's a scar that shall never leave from the participants, as people still continue to experience the lasting effects of war even after it has ended.